All right, so welcome to another deep dive where, as always, we take the sources you give us and really try to pull out the most useful and fascinating bits.
Yeah, exactly. And today we are going to be diving into Becoming Bulletproof by Evie Poumpouras.
Ooh, becoming bulletproof.
Yes, and
Exactly.
it is a really fascinating book. And the perspective we're getting here is that of a former Secret Service agent.
Wow, so somebody who really knows about high-stakes situations and how to manage your fear in those moments.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about pressure.
Yeah, and she kicks off the book with a pretty gripping account of her 9/11 experience and, just throws you right into the chaos and confusion of that day.
Yeah, and one detail that really stuck with me was her description of a man just gazing upwards as the debris was raining down, and then boom, he was instantly crushed.
Gosh, yeah, it really drives home how quickly things can change and the unpredictable nature of life. I mean, one minute you're there and the next minute
Yeah.
it's over.
And amidst all that tragedy, she talks about comforting a Polish truck driver who was just consumed with worry for his cousin who was trapped.
Oh, wow.
And it's just this incredible display of her instinct to help others, even when she's grappling with her own anxieties.
Yeah, it really speaks to her sense of duty and compassion, even in those moments of extreme fear.
It's quite remarkable.
So this leads into her main point, which is, distinguishing fear from panic and understanding how our bodies react to threats with that fight, flight, or freeze response.
Yes, the famous F3.
The F3, right.
And, it's something we all experience, but how we each react is what's fascinating. It can be so different from person to person.
Absolutely. And she actually gives a perfect example of this with a story about a burglary at her parents' house.
Oh, tell me about this.
Yeah, so basically she immediately jumps into fight mode. She's chasing the intruder down, but her mom, on the other hand, completely freezes up. She's paralyzed by fear.
Oh, wow. So you see both ends of the spectrum there.
Exactly. And it highlights, how diverse those F3 patterns can be and how knowing your own pattern is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, because if you know how you're likely to react, it gives you a chance to anticipate those reactions and make more conscious choices instead of just being controlled by panic.
Right. It puts you back in the driver's seat.
Exactly.
So I thought it was also interesting to learn a little bit about her upbringing and how that shaped her view of fear.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, she grew up in a neighborhood with a lot of crime, so her parents were understandably pretty anxious.
Oh, I bet.
And they tried to shelter her from the outside world.
Mm.
But she wasn't one to be held back by fear.
No, I get the sense she's not that type of person.
Not at all. In fact, she actually defied her parents' worries and joined the police academy.
Wow, that's a bold move.
It really is, and I think it speaks volumes about her inner drive and her determination to kind of forge her own path.
Yeah, to confront those fears head on and not let them dictate her life.
Exactly, and this really lays the groundwork for her concept of building mental armor. Creating a shield against negativity and hardship.
So it's like a metaphorical bulletproof vest.
Precisely. And she emphasizes that this isn't just for people in law enforcement, it's for everyone.
Absolutely. We could all use a bit of mental armor in our lives.
For sure. And she actually outlines a four-step approach to developing this mental resilience. Expose, acclimate, adjust, and overcome.
Okay, I like that. It's actionable.
Right. It gives you a framework to work with.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a fear of public speaking.
Okay, classic example.
Yeah. So using this approach, you would start by gradually exposing yourself to smaller speaking opportunities.
Baby steps, right.
Exactly. And then as you get more comfortable, you acclimate to that feeling of being in the spotlight, and you can start adjusting your strategies, maybe focusing on breathing techniques or refining your delivery.
So it's like dipping your toes into the water before jumping in head first.
Yeah, and it reminds me of this concept called the hormetic effect.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
Well, it's basically a scientific principle that suggests that controlled exposure to stressors can actually lead to positive adaptations.
So like working out your muscles.
Exactly. You need
Yeah.
that resistance to get stronger. And in the same way, confronting our fears in small doses can actually make us more resilient over time.
Makes sense.
And she even talks about the fear of being alone, which we often perceive as a negative thing.
Oh, for sure.
But she argues that solitude can actually be incredibly beneficial for creativity and personal growth.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Sometimes you need that space to really connect with yourself and tap into your creative energy.
Right? And it ties into this idea of discerning signals from noise. If we let fear control every decision, we might miss out on opportunities for growth and self-discovery.
It's like listening to that inner critic all the time instead of trusting your intuition and taking calculated risks.
Absolutely. And that brings us to this fascinating tactic she introduces called getting off the X.
Getting off the X.
Yeah, and it's actually inspired by firearms training.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued.
So imagine you're in a firefight. Standing still makes you an easy target, right?
Makes sense.
But if you're constantly moving, you become unpredictable and much harder to hit.
So it's not about avoiding conflict altogether.
Not necessarily. It's more about strategically maneuvering to minimize your exposure to those who drain your energy or hinder your progress.
I like that. It's about choosing your battles wisely.
Exactly. And Poumpouras applies this to everyday life, suggesting that we should be mindful of the X we might be standing on, whether it's a toxic relationship or a work environment that's just draining us.
It's about recognizing when it's time to step away and preserve our mental and emotional resources.
Absolutely. And sometimes the most powerful move is simply disengaging and moving on to something better.
Makes sense to me.
So now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what Poumpouras calls the Secret Service mindset.
All right, bring on the secret strategies.
Well, it's all about proactive thinking and being prepared for the unexpected. And she shares a pretty amazing story about protecting Barbara Bush.
Oh, I've heard about this. I think she even went to Coachella with her, right?
Yes, she did, which just shows you the unpredictable nature of their work.
You gotta be ready for anything.
Exactly. And one of the key takeaways is the importance of always having multiple routes planned out in case of an emergency, what she calls ingress and egress.
So, like having a plan B and a plan C.
Always. And she also makes a point of saying that we shouldn't rely solely on technology for navigation during a crisis.
Oh, that's interesting. Why is that?
Well, what happens if your phone dies or you lose cell service?
Oh, right. Good point.
You need to be able to think on your feet and have a backup plan. And that really highlights the need for developing situational awareness, that mental map that helps you navigate effectively under pressure.
Yeah, those mental maps can be lifesavers sometimes.
Definitely. And speaking of reading situations, let's talk about lie detection, which is where Poumpouras' expertise as a polygraph examiner really shines.
Oh, this is fascinating stuff.
It is. And she actually shares a chilling story about a seemingly perfect applicant, like a golden boy type,
Okay.
who turned out to be a rapist.
Oh, wow. That sends chills down my spine.
Right. It's a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and even those who seem totally trustworthy can have dark secrets.
So, how do you see through that?
Well, Poumpouras emphasizes the importance of looking beyond the surface and attuning yourself to those subtle cues that might betray hidden motives.
So, it's about reading between the lines.
Exactly. And she lays out 3 key principles for effectively reading people.
All right, let's hear them.
Number 1 is don't take it personally.
Interesting.
She stresses that everyone lies, and it's more valuable to understand their motivations than to judge them.
So it's more about understanding why someone might lie rather than getting caught up in the moral implications.
Exactly. It's about taking a more detached approach.
Okay, what's principle number 2?
Don't put people in a box.
Okay, so don't make assumptions.
Right, because everyone's different, and we can't rely on stereotypes or simplistic assumptions when we're trying to interpret someone's actions. We need to establish a baseline for each individual.
So it's about recognizing that everyone has their own unique patterns of behavior.
Exactly. And that leads us to principle number 3. Find the baseline.
Ooh, finding the baseline. I like it.
Yeah, so basically you want to observe how someone acts when they're relaxed and at ease.
So you can spot deviations when they're under pressure?
Exactly. It's like creating a mental snapshot of their authentic self so that you can more easily detect inconsistencies when they're stressed or trying to deceive you.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having a reference point.
Right, and once you understand these principles, you can start to gain a much deeper understanding of human behavior and become a more astute observer of the world around you.
Wow, we've covered so much ground already, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's so much more to uncover, and I'm really excited to dive into the next layer of Poumpouras' insights.
Well, let's not waste any time. Then let's move on to part 2 of this deep dive and see what other gems we can unearth.
That's good to me.
You know, as we dig deeper into Poumpouras' wisdom in becoming bulletproof, it's clear that it's not just about, surviving tough situations. It's about thriving in them.
It's about cultivating that inner strength and resilience that helps you bounce back from anything.
Exactly. And she really dismantles this idea that being bulletproof means being perfect or invincible.
Right. It's not about being fearless.
It's about acknowledging our vulnerabilities and making deliberate choices to move forward despite them.
And one thing that really struck me was her emphasis on surrounding ourselves with what she calls influencers.
Influencers, like on social media.
Not quite. She's talking about things that uplift and inspire us, that give us that extra boost of motivation when we need it.
Okay, so things that give us strength.
Exactly. It could be a movie that always gets you pumped up,
Oh, yeah, I have a few of those.
or a song that makes you feel invincible.
Like your own personal anthem.
Right. Or even a quote that really resonates with you.
I like that. It's like building a mental arsenal of inspiration.
Exactly. And she even suggests creating a bulletproof playlist.
A bulletproof
Yeah, a
playlist.
collection of songs that empower you and make you feel ready to take on the world.
Okay, I'm definitely making one of those.
Me too. It's like curating your own soundtrack for resilience.
I love that.
And here's a question she poses that I found really thought-provoking. Do you care if people like you?
Ooh, that's interesting because in today's world, it's almost cool to not care what others think.
Right, but she makes a compelling argument for the importance of likability.
Not in a people-pleasing way, though.
Exactly. It's about cultivating qualities that foster connection, trust, and influence.
So it's about building genuine relationships.
Precisely. And she actually tells a funny story about a fire training exercise where she had to hold a fire hose.
Oh, I bet that was intense.
It was. And amidst all the heat and chaos, all she could think about was the instructor yelling, "Don't drop the hose."
So she held on tight.
Oh, she did. But here's the funny part. The two male agents who were supposed to be supporting her, they bolted.
They ran away.
They did. Which just goes to show you the importance of dependability and following through on your commitments.
It's about being someone others can rely on even when things get tough.
Exactly. And that ties into her point about taking ownership of our mistakes.
Oh, for sure.
She talks about an incident where she was in charge of security for a presidential event, and a crucial detail was overlooked.
Oh, no, that's a big deal.
It was, and it could have jeopardized the president's safety.
Wow, the stakes are high in that job.
They are, but instead of deflecting blame or making excuses, she took full responsibility even though she wasn't directly at fault.
That's impressive. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does, and she emphasizes that accountability is paramount in the Secret Service.
It's about owning up to your actions and learning from your mistakes.
Exactly. And that brings us to her insights on leadership, which she gleaned from protecting various world leaders.
Ooh, this is juicy stuff.
It is, and she starts with President Bill Clinton.
Okay, what did she learn from him?
Well, she recounts a story about how he personally thanked every single member of the kitchen staff at a formal event.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable.
It is, and he even took the time to chat with a maid who was organizing towels.
So he really made an effort to connect with people on all levels.
Exactly, and it speaks to his humility and his appreciation for everyone regardless of their position.
That's a great lesson in leadership.
It is, and then we have Hillary Clinton, who she describes as a force of nature.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
She recalls how Hillary insisted on marching in the Gay Pride Parade, despite the increased security risks.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It is, and it shows her commitment to her values and her willingness to stand up for what she believes in.
Even when it puts her in a vulnerable position.
Exactly. And then we have President George H.W. Bush, who Poumpouras describes as remarkably self-aware and modest.
Interesting.
She remembers an instance where he insisted on wearing a simple baseball cap instead of his usual presidential attire.
Oh, that's kind of endearing.
It is, and it highlights his grounded nature and his ability to connect with people on a human level.
It's like he understood that true leadership isn't about putting on a show.
Right, it's about being comfortable with yourself and letting your actions speak for themselves.
Makes sense.
And then we have Laura Bush, who Poumpouras describes as the epitome of grace and composure.
Okay, I can definitely see that.
She tells a story about how Laura insisted on greeting and taking photos with well-wishers, even though it disrupted the security protocols.
So she prioritized those personal connections.
Absolutely, and it shows her warmth and her genuine care for others.
It's like she understood that those small moments of interaction can have a big impact.
Right, and finally we have President Barack Obama.
Okay, what did she learn from him?
Well, she shares a story about how he handled an awkward encounter with a congressman who was more interested in a photo opportunity than a genuine conversation.
Oh, I've seen those types before.
We all have, but despite the congressman's behavior, Obama remained calm and courteous and even took the time to chat with his kids.
So he didn't let the congressman's behavior get to him.
Exactly, and it speaks to his exceptional composure and his ability to rise above pettiness.
That's a valuable quality to have.
It is, and I think all of these stories offer us valuable lessons in leadership and character.
They show us the human side of these larger-than-life figures.
And they remind us that we can embody those same qualities in our own lives.
Regardless of our titles or positions.
And speaking of vulnerability, Poumpouras then shares a very personal account of her father's battle with pancreatic cancer.
Oh, wow, that must have been tough.
It was, and she describes sitting by his bedside, witnessing his decline, and feeling powerless to alleviate his suffering.
It's a heartbreaking experience to watch someone you love go through that.
It is, and she actually draws parallels to how she felt during 9/11, that sense of helplessness and forces beyond her control.
So it's a different kind of fear.
It is, and it's a reminder that fear can manifest in many forms throughout our lives.
But it's how we respond to it that matters.
Absolutely, and that's a key takeaway from her book.
Yeah, she's not saying we should try to eliminate fear altogether.
Right, because it's a natural part of the human experience.
It's about learning to manage it and use it as a catalyst for growth.
And she ends by emphasizing that even in the face of our deepest fears, we have a choice.
We can either succumb to them or confront them with courage and honesty.
And that's a really empowering message.
It is. It reminds us that we all have the strength within us to overcome even the most difficult challenges.
And that's a perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore even more of Poumpouras' wisdom and see how we can apply it to our own lives.
All right, let's do it. I'm ready for more.
As we wrap up this deep dive into becoming bulletproof, it's clear that it's more than just a catchy title.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a blueprint for building resilience and strength.
Exactly. And it's for everyone, not just, Secret Service agents or people in high-stress jobs.
Right. We all face challenges and uncertainties in life.
And one of the key takeaways for me is that it's not about achieving some kind of perfect state of fearlessness.
Yeah, nobody's truly bulletproof in that sense.
Right. It's more about acknowledging those vulnerabilities and making conscious choices to move forward despite them.
It's about embracing those imperfections and using them as fuel for growth.
And I really like her idea of curating our own influencers.
Those things that uplift and inspire us.
Exactly. It could
Yeah.
be anything, a movie, a song, a quote, even a person who embodies the qualities we admire.
So it's like surrounding ourselves with positive energy and reminders of our own potential.
Precisely. And she even suggests creating a bulletproof playlist.
Oh yeah, I remember that, like a soundtrack for resilience.
Exactly. Those songs that pump you up and make you feel ready to take on anything.
I love that idea.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, let's try to distill the most impactful takeaways from becoming bulletproof.
Okay, let's see if we can boil it down to the essentials.
What are those nuggets of wisdom we can carry with us and actually apply to our own lives?
Well, I think understanding our individual F3 response is crucial.
That fight, flight, or freeze reaction.
Yeah. Exactly. Knowing how we tend to react under pressure can help us make more conscious choices instead of just being ruled by panic.
It's like having a user manual for your own nervous system,
And then, of course, there's the importance of building mental resilience.
which is an ongoing process.
Absolutely. And Poumpouras gives us that four-step framework: expose, acclimate, adjust, overcome.
Right. It's about gradually confronting our fears and expanding our comfort zones.
Like any kind of training, you got to push yourself a little bit at a time.
And then there's the whole idea of adopting a Secret Service mindset.
Being proactive, thinking ahead, planning for contingencies,
Always having a plan B.
and not relying too heavily on technology, which can fail us at the worst possible moment.
So true. And then there's the art of reading people.
Deciphering their motivations, observing their behavior, recognizing those subtle cues.
It's like becoming a human lie detector.
Not quite, but it definitely helps you navigate social situations with more awareness.
And finally, I think it all comes down to authenticity and integrity.
Staying true to our values, owning our mistakes, and striving to make a positive impact on the world.
And those are values we can all aspire to.
Absolutely. And I think Poumpouras' book gives us a roadmap for how to do that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into becoming bulletproof, we hope you've gained some valuable insights and tools for navigating life's challenges.
And that you feel empowered to confront your fears and step into your full potential.
Remember, it's not about being invincible. It's about embracing those vulnerabilities and using them to become stronger and more resilient.
And who knows, maybe you'll even inspire others to do the same.
So until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.